Very welcome to another edition of Page 180. And guys, just to bring you behind the curtain a little bit, I map out kind of what my general episode trajectory will be based on like when big movies or TV shows are coming out and stuff like that as well. And when I mapped out this segment months ago, I kind of thought I'd be having a bit of a different conversation. We're going to talk about the Rugby World Cup Final, of course, next week, and we're going to preview that. And I was kind of like, yeah, it's going to be Wade, lads, squad. We're going to do it, Ireland. But that's not how it's worked out. But joining me to discuss it anyway, because it's always a pleasure to have him on the show. And look, we're still invested. Like, I don't know how invested we are now that we don't get to root against England, but like we still are invested. We want to see who of our previous foes will walk away with a trophy that we'll always forever feel should have had our name etched on it. Joining me is to discuss it all is the one, the only David Kent of the Irish Examiner. Always a pleasure to have you, Kento, on the show. Kento, last week I managed to it got a lot of positive response from Irish people, but upset a lot of people in New Zealand and Argentina. I had a bit of an emotional immediate post-game rant where we kind of discussed Ireland, like, and how the feelings around and the disappointment of the quarterfinal defeat. We're a week away now, and we can kind of have a bit of perspective on it. What are your thoughts now on, and I suppose kind of before we get to the final, looking at Ireland, what's next? Because I spoke last week about how it's very easy for us to say, 4 more years will be better and we'll have better prep and stuff like that. But, you know, we won't have Sexton, we won't have Keith Earls. We're going to have a lot of change in the camp. There's rumors that Andy Farrell himself mightn't be around as well now, creeping in, which is incredibly worrying. But Kendo, what do you feel is next for Ireland and after, and how do we bounce back from that?
Still stings a bit, doesn't it, really? When you look back, even just thinking back to the game itself. But in terms of what's next, and I'm actually going to plug a piece from the Irish Examiner during the week. It is a subscriber-only piece, but it's from Ronan O'Gara. And Ronan O'Gara basically said, listen, Grand Slams are rare, they're great, but it's very similar to what you said, actually. They're just not enough when you have a team like Ireland and the squad that Ireland had going into this World Cup. Where we go from here, it's almost like going into another wilderness again, where it's like it was all set up for us, and we talked about it. And it was all perfect. We had like 2011, we had one of the best squads, but the coach might not have been great. 2015 and 2019, we had a great coach, but the squad wasn't great. Everything was lined up this year, and it just reverted back to the same old tradition at this stage, and it's an unwanted tradition, but it is. I think we have to get out of the mantra, and I've said this to a few people now, of focusing everything in a World Cup cycle on the Six Nations, because it's what the Southern Hemisphere teams do. I think if you had offered any Argentina, South Africa, Australia, maybe not, definitely Australia, given how they went, but Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, listen, you can't win a rugby championship in the next 4 years, but you can go to a World Cup final. You can win a World Cup. They'll bite your hand off for it instantly, because it is all about. And listen, there's a debate to be had there, and I think we had it before as well, about the quality of the rugby championship compared to the Six Nations in terms of what gains you're getting and how much kind of importance is placed on it. But I like you're looking at 4 years' time. Do we have Johnny Sexton's replacement? Probably. Have we found him yet? No. 4 years to do that, but then like your Tyke Burns, your Bundy Keys, they're all 4 years old. Your James Lowe's, they're all 4 years older. Peter O'Mahony, you can name as many of them as you want. Where it's like, it just kind of feels like we might have missed the chance this time around, because like, how often, like in 4 years' time, are Australia going to completely collapse again? They're probably not. Are France going to feel the pressure on their home turf and straddle a bit and get knocked out in the quarters? Probably not. Like, again, the draw is a huge thing, but are England going? I say, are England going to play as poor? England were 2 minutes away from a World Cup final, which is mad considering what was going into this tournament. Are Wales going to be as poor? Are Scotland going to get the bounce of a ball? Like, it's just all these variables where it's like it could be different to what it was this time around, and that does not bode well for Ireland for me, because there are more questions about us coming out of this tournament than there are going into it.
And it's discussed. I remember I had a conversation with my old Low Blows co-host and a frequenter of these parts too, Corporate Keane. And and he's not a rugby guy, but I was trying to explain the context of this because there's a big wrestling show happening in Ireland that's due to happen on the same day, and he was going to that, and I'm like, they're gonna have to cancel it if Ireland get to the World Cup final because this is reeling in the ear shit. This is like historic. This will never happen again, and that's like that kind of context and explanation, like, because again, he was kind of saying, no, look, we're great, we're a good team. And I'm like, you don't understand. This is the window, this is the night, this is the moment. And it hasn't happened. And now, that we're like, that's our window. That's our we shot our shot, and it's so painful. And so confusing. And Andy Farrell, the only thing that makes me, and like, we'll just touch on England. I'll cheer myself up by reveling in England's misery, because arguably that was a much more painful loss last night than they had against South Africa. Mainly because, we can turn around and console ourselves by saying, look, New Zealand on balance were the better team on the day. England on balance were by far the better team last night. Like, South Africa just did not show up. I was getting ready to have a discussion. I knew we were having this discussion, and we're taping this obviously the morning after. And I was getting ready to use our old cup final analogy to describe why South Africa shit themselves. They played one of the most historic, emotionally draining performances in the history of rugby altogether last week to beat France, one of the most sensational games. And again, they just didn't seem to have a lot left in the tank. But England did play better. Is the one thing consoling, because the player turnover, do you know what? We've been really, really good for that. We've managed to do that since 2011. Since we lost Keith Wood, we're like, we're never going to have another Keith Wood. We're never going to have another Paul O'Connell. And we've managed to replenish, and the club game being strong, especially in Europe, kind of helps with that. So I kind of believe that under the right person, we can build ourselves back up. And I believe that right person is Andy Farrell. Do you think that England doing so well and outperforming expectations in this may buy Borthwick some time? Or if they get a chance at Farrell, are they going to bite your hand off? Because I think like Farrell's not denying it. He's not coming out and saying, no, I'm staying put. Do you think we might get 4 more years of having Farrell? Because I don't know who else is available. Like, we could get Rog. There are people, and we can have that discussion if we need to. But like, do you think that Borthwick may have bought himself some time with that overperformance to give? And I'm only asking this to give us some hope.
He definitely has, because again, we were talking on a preview. I think if you remember right, I said England wouldn't even get out of the group because they were that unprepared and they had played that poorly. And he's made me look like an Egypt, because they've just navigated. Like, even the first game against Argentina, when they went out of 14 after Tom Curry got sent off, and it was like, all right, you know what, it's fine, we'll just kill you by drop goals. It's like, yep, okay, plan B, worked out well. No one's ever said that you have to play sexy rugby to win a World Cup. Yep. And Borthwick, even from when you go back to his Leicester days, it's similar enough, where it's like, okay, we don't mind. Like, he will happily take a 6-3 if it means his team wins. Yep. There is the question about whether now there's more pressure on him because he's done so well with a team that wasn't meant to do well. But I think rugby is different to football in many ways. But that's one of them where it's like, if, I don't know, Roberto De Zerbi in his very first year had brought Brighton to second in the Premier League, it would have been like, right, you have to keep challenging now. Whereas when England is like, rugby is like, oh, look, it's the Six Nations and, the November series or whatever it is. So I don't think, like, maybe we'll get, Borthwick definitely bought himself at least 2 years. Depending on how they're doing the Six Nations in them and how they're playing and how they're looking going into the second half of the World Cup cycle, they may start looking and going next door and going, Andy Farrell's done relatively solid there with that Ireland team. And listen, you wouldn't begrudge Farrell a chance at going back and managing England. And, like, how often do you get to manage your own son at an international level of rugby? Yeah. Who's like, that's a big draw for him. It has to be. So, like, I do applaud England for getting so close. I do think, and I still think, it would have been objectively funnier if they got to the final and lost again, just like it was 4 years ago. Would have been hilarious. Am I sad that they're not in the final? Not one bit. But yeah, I think I do think I respect Borthwick now for just managing to take England to that point where they were 2 minutes away from being the world champion to get into another world final.
And it's also very funny.
It is very funny. The best part.
Because it's like South Africa did not deserve to win that. Like, and in any other, if it wasn't England, I'd actually be so pissed because, and we've spoken about this, nothing bothers me more in a competition like a World Cup where we only get one every 4 years. I can live with it. And it does bother me, say, with a Champions League, when you get a team like Chelsea or Liverpool who like are playing shit in their domestic league, and somehow then at the end of the season we're like, they're the best team in Europe. And it's like, no, they're fucking not. They just played this tournament and put everything into it. It does bother me when we get kind of undeserving kind of finalists at the end, and like the 4-year cycle of rugby just essentially comes to nothing. And it would have been so unsatisfying to see England in there, but also they were the better team. They really dominated. They played so well, which just again just makes it funnier because misery is better shared. It's okay with us being miserable as long as England are miserable too. But we're at the final stage. South Africa, New Zealand. I think before we get into how it's going to be won and who should we consider the favorites, I do want to touch on a question that I've been talking a lot to everyone I've spoken to about this since last night. I've asked the same question. Who do Ireland want to see win? Like, do we want, on one hand, we have South Africa, who we can say, well, we beat them and technically we should be the world champions. So, and just tell ourselves that to make ourselves feel better. Or do we want New Zealand and we say, well, look, New Zealand were the best team in the world and they just proved it again. And like, it actually makes our loss more understandable that we lost to them. Like, emotionally, who are you rooting for next weekend?
If you think it stings now, looking at what happened to Ireland, imagine how much it'll sting when New Zealand lifts the cup instead. And you're looking at it going, well, if we'd beaten them, we would have beaten Argentina. And look, they beat South Africa, so we probably would have beaten South Africa again. So I'm all for the box emotionally. I also called it pre-tournament as well. So there is that side of it where it's like I'm technically kind of on a winning streak by predicting tournaments with you. I said Italy win Euro 2020, stuck to it. Called South Africa win it. Don't ignore anything that I said in between those two tournaments. None of that matters.
They're the only ones that count. I can't remember anything else.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. But like, yeah, I think just in terms from that aspect, like I get the point where we will beat South Africa, so playground rules. Well, we beat South Africa, so we're the world champions.
Yeah.
No, I think it'll be, and also if you're looking at it, if South Africa do win, they go back to back. Doesn't happen that often, so they are like, it'll be one of them where it's like, you know what, they deserve it. Whereas New Zealand go, it's like, oh, could so easily and probably should so easily have been us,
Yeah. We have there's a lot, yeah, and look, it was tough to watch the New Zealand game because again, all week I was getting it in the neck from Argentina, and like it wasn't just Argentina supporters, but I was getting in the neck from people just turning around and going, "Oh, do you think that's why you lost because you were overwriting the competition?" I'm like, "No, we're just better than Argentina. Like most teams in the tournament are better than Argentina. They've just had a really favorable draw, like, and they made a balls even in their group and kind of fell arse backwards through it." But like it was sickening seeing New Zealand just walk all over them because it just told us, yeah, we would have been there 100%. Like we would have been, if we beat New Zealand, we would have been in the final and we came so close. Anyway, look, we're not here to talk about Ireland, even though we sound like traumatized people, which we partially are. We're here to talk about the Rugby World Cup Final, South Africa, New Zealand. And I guess the big question is, I don't know what happens next because I could explain why South Africa shit the bed. And we spoke about the cup final theory there. And I understand it, but the cup final theory, for anyone who doesn't know, when we did the All Show Paddy's New Yacht, it's when you play this epic marathon game where you win against all odds and you like everyone goes away from it thinking, well, they were amazing, they're going to win the final now, and in the next game they just come out and play terribly because they gave everything they had physically and emotionally to that game and they just had nothing left in the tank. Is that something South Africa could be worried about, or could the longer form of, like, we kind of saw South Africa wake up 70 minutes into the game, albeit, but they were like, oh, they're South Africa again. Like, I was actually confident once they started to get things moving. I'm like, oh, South Africa are going to win this, or like South Africa are going to go ahead and England will win with a drop goal, just because that's been England's story the World Cup. So I was like, one or the other, South Africa are coming back and this is going to be an exciting 10 minutes. Is that a reawakening for the Boks? Are they like, do they have anything left in the tank, or should New Zealand be favored based off the fact that they are just peaking at the right time? What does kind of, and we'll touch on rugby, but also our own kind of, I think one thing we have to learn from this Rugby World Cup is tournaments are a beast. The international tournaments like this are a beast to them among themselves, which is why this World Cup has made such a mockery of the 4-year cycle, because it just matters how you perform in the tournament. If you look at it on paper, New Zealand are coming into form at the right time. They're winning their hard game. Then they're going out, like, they are effectively us going into the New Zealand game. Like, they won the drag me out hard game against us. Then they went in the game where, like, they could have seen it as a banana skin against like Argentina, the same way we saw it against Scotland. They went out and just performed and just dominated. They're the form team coming into this. You wouldn't say they're the foreign team coming into the tournament, but also New Zealand and South Africa have taken strips out of each other. It's not like as if one team has dominated in recent times. Who are you thinking are the favourites here?
Like I 100% agree with you that England were the better side against South Africa. I don't agree that they ever looked like they were guaranteed to win though. Whereas I always felt, and I said it even at half time, where it was like, listen, South Africa are playing terribly. I still had them to reel them in because England could never get more than whatever was 9 points away. If England had got a try in the first half, or if they gone 10 or 12 points up, would have gone, you know what, fair enough, that's a bit much of a mountain to climb. But as you mentioned, South Africa had something in the pocket. They had, and listen, you have to get Razzie Erasmus credit for pulling off his fly half an hour into a World Cup semi-final. That could have backfired miserably, but it didn't, because look who steps up and kicks the winner from the halfway line. They had the bomb squad. They knew that they were confident in that sense that, well, we'll once we have our forward, our new pack on, no one's going to stop us in the scrum. And like twice in a row against France and against England, they called a mark and chose to scrum on their own 22-yard line. That is confidence. But yeah, the cup final, you look at it, go, this huge issue, like monstrous clash against France, which went down to the last phase, very last phase, where it's like you have to play perfect, similar to New Zealand against Ireland. Then you have to do it all again against England, where it's like, oh, buy your time. The legs are gone, the head is gone. They didn't want to run, they wanted to kick and just get it that way. And then you look at New Zealand having a scrum. It's a bit like how you asked me, geez, it must be nearly 2 months ago at this stage again, when Ireland against Samoa in the warm up, where it's like, would you rather have gone 60 points clear and come into it, and instead of getting involved in a tough battle? Doesn't quite apply here because it's a World Cup semi final, when World Cup final we're talking about. But I still think I'd rather be in South Africa's position than New Zealand's, because New Zealand didn't have any kind of, maybe the first 20 minutes maybe against Argentina. And then it was like, well, we scored another 2 tries, game over, and take the foot off the gas. They didn't, obviously, because they kept putting up the scores, but just in terms of a mindset. Whereas South Africa have had to go to the well twice and are comfortable doing it. They know they know when they're in a tough fight that they have the options off the bench. If you can bring on someone like Faf de Klerk as well as your six forwards, that's a serious, like, no panel, no squad in World Rugby is going to be able to deal with that. If they're like, if you can keep, I think South Africa would be happy if they can keep it within maybe even 10 against New Zealand, because they as you mentioned, they're used to playing, and they're used to what the All Blacks will bring forward. And similar to the way the All Blacks will know that, look, yeah, all right, we've had a free wheel against Argentina in semi. There'll be no doubt that South Africa are going to be coming right at them as well. So it's obviously we had the warm up game where South Africa put 40 on them. Don't think it's going to be anything like that again. Do not think it's going to be anywhere near that. It's going to be a real war of attrition. I just think that's because of the way the running has gone. I think South Africa are better prepared for that. Now, I could look very foolish. Ian Foster and Joe Schmidt could cook up a plan where it goes, you know what, yeah, we're in the game, but suddenly we're comfortable seeing it out. We've seen All Blacks teams over the years do that, especially in Northern Hemisphere on tours where they've been against the wall, even in the Aviva. You think back to before we managed to get the 2018 when I want to say it was in the Aviva. All those games before was like, oh, this is the one that Ireland have where they're only a point behind, and then New Zealand just go, nope. Even the game in the quarterfinals, like, oh, Ireland are going to do it. Ireland are going to do it. No, New Zealand, 37 phases, perfect rugby, perfect defensive rugby. They're fine. They're comfortable in doing it. It's a real fascinating one where, yeah, look, should a better team probably be there? Maybe, but this is what we have. So it's a fascinating one, and I think the first 20 minutes are going to be huge. Just to see how, obviously it's the same in every game. First 20 minutes, how the game will go, but particularly in this one, because on one hand you could see New Zealand go, as they have so many times, go, right, we're just going to steamroll and put everything into the first 20 minutes and get as much of a lead up as they can, because South Africa will go, well, listen, if we can keep, as I said, we can keep you within 10, we know what's coming off the bench. So it's one that am I happy it's the way it's turned out without Ireland in it? No, but it's of the options that we had going into the semi-finals, it was probably the one where I was looking at it going, you know what? Yeah, give me that one.
It's a great final, and you look at kind of the early odds. Like, I've just checked Paddy Power here. New Zealand tentatively -1 with it. So, but again, that's nothing. That is because they literally just have to, in rugby, they have to pick someone. It is a pick 'em, you know what I mean? And again, I think they're putting on momentum. I think New Zealand probably deserve that as well. I think they're walking in just with momentum at their heels. I think South Africa, you cannot understate. Again, Rugby World Cups, and we use the word attrition even in this conversation over and over. That's what a Rugby World Cup is. It's survive, and the winning team is the team that survives at the end. And if you're looking at the tournament that it's been, New Zealand took an absolute pasting to France in the opening night. Okay, fair enough. But they have just righted the ship. You know what I mean? They have had everything. South Africa, you could argue similar against us, but even then, like, they can look away and go, we're the better team. We just didn't have a kicker on the night and we kind of missed a couple of chances. So again, I don't think South Africa will take too much against them, but they're just coming into this. They have to be on their last legs. And granted, yes, they have a week to prepare and stuff like that. And you can get a lot done in a week. And, you know, if you put everything into a World Cup final in the same way, I'm sure they're going to. I think there's two bets that I feel really safe with. I feel like the under 42.5 is what Paddy Power says. The under, I feel like that's a really good bet. I agree that it's not going to be either team blows the other way. And also, like, New Zealand first half, I agree. New Zealand are going to come out strong, and it's about, can South Africa come back and survive it. So I think it's a really interesting one. I love the final. We can't really get into it because we're a week away and we don't know kind of the prep and the build and stuff like that as well. But just kind of emotionally right now, where are your thoughts? Who's going to win it? Who's going to be the World Cup champions? You seem to be leaning slightly towards South Africa, but if you have to put your money where your mouth is here, are you sticking with them, your pre-tournament picks?
I agree. Like, I think, yeah, the under is the safest bet you will ever see in this. I think it's going to be maybe. It could come down to, like, I'm feeling it's going to come down to a drop goal anyway. Like a kind of a last second Ronan O'Gara style where it's like, New Zealand again defending on their line, can't get South Africa can't break through. Handré Pollard into the pocket. He get like, it doesn't even need to be the pocket. He can clearly drop a goal from halfway. I agree. Like, and listen, that's what cost Ireland in 2015, the game against France in the pool stage where we lost O'Connell and Rob Kearney and Tommy Bowe, and then Argentina were like, sweet, this worked out well. And it was just that simple. But it's just, yeah, I just think they have enough. And again, the week off is huge. Obviously, New Zealand have injuries as well, and they're going to be different as well. But I just think that there's something about this South Africa side where it's very similar to Ireland, where it's like, we don't care what you throw at us. Death by 1,000 cuts if we have to scrum you, if we have to get now. The one thing I would have an issue with South Africa is their set pieces. They haven't been great. Obviously scrum unbelievable, but the lineouts haven't been too consistent. I know they took 5 or 6 off us in the first 20 minutes, but then we figured it out and we actually started winning a couple off them. Whereas New Zealand have been rock solid with that. So you might not see a lot of kicks to touch from, unless they're in their own 22 or whatever, from I would imagine Handré Pollard is going to get the call to start, and I feel terrible for Matty Libbok, but you know, you can't do that in a World Cup semi-final and expect to come back for the final. It's harsh, but that's what the coaches get paid for. So I don't think New Zealand are going to get as much freedom as they have against the likes of Argentina, and even against in that run through where Ireland maybe were nervous against them, where they let them kind of take advantage of the game. Whereas New Zealand, it was on, like, Ireland played that game on New Zealand's terms for the first hour, and only kind of got into it then kind of late on. They didn't have, like, I guess Argentina, they were able to just control. South Africa won't let them do that, and even if they do, South Africa will be comfortable. Like I said, keeping it within the 1 or 2 scores, just because of what I'm really intrigued to see what South Africa and Brazil do at scrum half. Because the last 2 games, Faf de Klerk coming off the bench has made an incredible impact. Yeah. So do you risk that again? Do you start and go, well, okay, we have him coming off, or do you put him in from the start to try and control the game? So the team selection is going to be massive. You're correct in saying that I am leaning towards the Springboks, but as like I said, pick them. I don't see it being anything more than 3 to 5 for winning margin. And to be honest, extra time wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah. Oh man, it'd be amazing. But imagine, like, I'm just saying, it comes down to a last minute drop goal. Imagine like a Sexton in Paris, but for the World Cup. Oh my fucking God. Like, my nerves.
Yeah.
Oh, unbelievable.
Like, you talk about reel in the years. That'll probably get shown a reel in the years anyway, but something like that happens.
Oh yeah. And look, it's all in play. And I'm starting to feel a lot better. I'm glad we had this conversation, because I am hyped now for this. It's a great match. We're getting a run of them again, even in football, the World Cup final there. Last December, Argentina against Messi, you had that kind of meeting of icons. It had that iconic kind of symbology. And again, it's kind of like, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like, we can have all our narratives. We can have everything. It comes down to on the day. Does someone pivotal get injured? Does someone get hurt? I am going to lean towards Springboks as well. I'm going to be cheering for them. I can't say with any confidence that I'd put money anywhere near either of them or this, although the under is very enticing. But also, like, again, it's just, I'm a big fan of narratives. I like the World Cup winners to be people I can look back on and go, yeah, they're the World Cup. They've been the best team in the world over the past 4 years. And South Africa have a claim to it. The All Blacks just have let themselves down at times over the last 4 years. But again, what better way to make a statement? And we have seen New Zealand do that before in World Cups. It's kind of their thing. So really intriguing stuff. And I'm glad we had this conversation. I can look forward now rather than lament, which, you know, I've got the next 4 years to do that anyway. Before we go, though,